Hello, Wil Franklin here with Trinity River Vineyards. I'm at the Gardner Ranch in Willow Creek, Humboldt County, California. What a lovely spring day. I feel very lucky to be out here. Was checking on bud break, which finally occurred. It's 2 weeks late. It seems to be happening all over California, but that's reasonable for the cold, wet winter we had. So we're right on target with the rest of California. It's going to be a slightly shorter growing season, but I love that. That means brighter, crisper wines, potentially. We could always have a hot summer and everything just catches right back up and we end up in the same place. And that's really what happens when you can control the time that you pick. You can pick later or you can pick earlier. So in the long run, a late start is actually pretty good. It avoids frost damage, and you usually have plenty of time to catch up and just pick for the wine and the wine styles you want. It was a long cold winter, as you know, and that got me thinking about new things and old things, just reflecting. And I've started a new brand called Wild and Spontaneous, and I'm really looking forward to continuing that. And some of what I was thinking about is how to explain the difference between the two wines and the two brands. We got Trinity River Vineyards and we've got Wild and Spontaneous, and they're very different. And of course, which one's better? So many times I'm at an event, a wine tasting, and somebody asks me, what's your favorite wine? Or what's the best wine? And I don't even know how to answer that. Best by whose standards? By what standard? What do you expect? And my favorite is like asking me if I have a favorite child, or a favorite food. It just depends on what the mood I'm in for. So how do you describe Trinity River wines versus Wild and Spontaneous wines? Trinity River wines, as you know, clean, fruit-centric with a sense of place. That is what I've always tried to do, is capture the signature of soil, microclimate, the terroir of each vineyard. To me, that is the holy grail of winemaking. If you don't overwork the grapes will emerge and produce something very unique with intrinsic value. Intrinsic because it can only be produced in that vineyard, right? So it's really subtle though. The signature of place can be masked by too much new oak, and all you get is wood and oak flavors, right? So you've lost the signature of place. So to me, it's been very, very interesting and a continual learning experience on how to express the soil of this vineyard versus that vineyard. Some people are familiar with this when they taste Pinot Noir, which is a very expressive grape of place. Russian River Pinot does not taste like Anderson Valley Pinot, that doesn't taste like Oregon Pinot, and it doesn't taste like Burgundian Reds of France. So they all have a signature of place, and that's what Trinity River Vineyards is about. Wines that have recognizable classic fruit flavors, but are unique in that they capture the sense of place. Wild and Spontaneous is not worried about sense of place, so I can do some things that might mask it, but give you all kinds of energy and complexity in a different way. So the one thing that I have in common with natural wines, which I don't like that moniker because all wines are natural, but if you're familiar with the natural wine movement, they're different, they're odd, they're less normal or expected, they're abnormal in some way. And so I like to call these wines esoteric wines or wild wines. Wild and Spontaneous are wild. They're a little different. They're not what you expect. They're not what you expect in some cases because they use wild yeast, and wild yeast are just naturally everywhere. They settle down on the grape skins, and I pick the grapes and let the fermentation start spontaneously with whatever happens to be on the grape skins. Now that always adds a much larger diversity of microbes, bacteria and yeast, and those give off byproducts during fermentation. And those flavors can be like kombucha or sour beer, and that's a little less wine-like, a little less fruit-centric, a little less typical. And so wild and spontaneous, esoteric wines, natural wines are a little less fruit-centric and a little odd in their flavor profiles until you start tasting a lot of them, and then you'll see similarities. And that's what I mean by you lose the sense of place, because a wild wine from Sardinia can taste like a wild wine from Sicily or a wild wine from Spain, and that Spanish wild esoteric wine will have more in common with the flavors of the Sicilian wine than it does with other Spanish wines right around it. And so one style of wine, the classic, I call classic wines with a sense of place, have more in common with the other wines in their natural surroundings. And esoteric wines have more in common with methodology. That's what links up the two different styles. So I'm more interested in exploring new methods with the wild and spontaneous. For example, we use carbonic maceration to make very silky, low stringency wines that are easy to drink, fresh and lively, and even a little bit spritzy that gives it a little verve and youth and energy. So that's really fun to do to, say, a Syrah. We love the carbonic Syrah, just so easy to drink. And we I tried ancestral capture technique for making sparkling wine, which is really the very oldest method for making sparkling wine. All you do is bottle tight right before the grape juice is finished fermenting, and so all the leftover bubbles and all the leftover fermentation gets captured, and you make a sparkling wine through sort of auto fermentation, and you get bubbles right captured in the bottle. And that's like conditioning of beer, if you've ever done that. But that's the oldest method to do it, and it makes for a murkier wine, which is not classic, right? But if you're not worried about it, it's really interesting. These wines are naturally fermented. I don't use any SO2 because it's all been fresh, and the CO2 protects it. It pushes and keeps the pressure out. Nothing can get in. And so these wines have no sulfites. They're bubbly. They're a little murky. They have interesting flavor profiles from all the wild yeast. And so wild and spontaneous is about sort of energy and exploring new flavors, whereas Trinity River Vineyards, all about sense of place. If you're interested in trying these wines and checking out the differences, you can always go to trinityriver.com and check out wild and spontaneous wines of esoteric verve and energy, or you can try Trinity River wines that capture a sense of place and really good typicity for the fruit. Anyway, till next time, cheers.